Good morning. My name is Ian Charlotta, Hearing Officer for San Francisco Public Works. Cerise Waiters is the clerk of this hearing. This hearing is being recorded via Zoom and will be available afterwards through a link on the San Francisco Public Works website, sfpublicworks.org. As this is a virtual hearing, there is no sign-in sheet, so if you would like to receive information about the results of this hearing, please send an email to the email address listed on the hearing notice. This public hearing is being held to consider 3 appeals from property owners or public protests regarding removal and replacement actions that were approved by staff but protested by the public. The 3 orders on today's agenda are Hearing Order 210282 to consider the removal of one street tree with replacement adjacent to 255 Chattanooga Street by applicant, permit 795042. Staff approved the removal and the public has protested. Second item is Hearing Order 210283 to consider the removal of one street tree without replacement adjacent to 479 Prentice Street by Public Works. Staff initiated the removal and the public has protested. Third item is Hearing Order 210284 to consider the removal of one street tree with replacement adjacent to 551 Alvarado Street by applicant, permit 794772. Staff approved the removal and the public has protested. My job as a hearing officer is to gather the facts for the hearing item, listen to your testimony, and help our Director of Public Works make determinations. I will not be making any decisions today. Instead, I will forward the findings from this hearing and make my recommendations to the director. The director will make the final determinations. When the director's determinations are made, the department will notify you of them. Therefore, if you want to be notified, please contact the email address. The hearing will proceed as follows. For each case, I will ask Public Works staff to speak first and present the case. Then I will allow a member of the public, applicant in this case, who protested to speak. Then any other member of the public or witness who has additional contributions to make. Then the department, if the department would like to make any response to comments. And then, in this case, the applicant again, if that person has any rebuttals. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes to speak. The clerk will monitor the time for all speakers. I should note that each speaker will have one opportunity to speak. If they are not or members of the general public will have one opportunity to speak. So if you have taken an opportunity to speak, you will not be given a second opportunity. So please use your time effectively. Comments and questions should be addressed to me as the hearing officer and not to the department or the applicant. If you cannot finish your comments within the allotted time, you may submit written testimony to me by the end of this hearing. If I feel that a question is warranted, I will ask the question. After all comments are completed, I will close the item. We will now begin the hearing. Prior to hearing appeals regarding orders on today's agenda, members of the public may address the hearing officer on matters that are within the department's jurisdiction but not on today's agenda. Do we have any matters for discussion that were not on today's agenda?
Good morning. I have 2 issues. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, my name is John Nolte. I'm talking about items number 6 and 7. You did not say that they were on the agenda, but they are posted on the web. I see them. And second issue is rebuttals. That's not fair to have the appellants or somebody else have rebuttals and not the public have rebuttals when there are rebuttals. So I don't think that's fair that the public only has one rebuttal or one speaking and somebody else can speak multiple times for rebuttals. That's not fair to the whole hearing. So I think you should think about that before, or that issue when you discuss any item. Thank you for your time.
Okay, well, for the first point, you are correct. There were 2 additional items that were originally listed on the posted agenda. The applicants on those 2 items have requested to postpone the hearing for another day, so they are not on the order, but the order had already been, or the announcement had already been sent out before that request was processed. So I apologize for any confusion. And for the second item, your comments have been noted. Do we have any other comments?
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Just like to offer a little context for the proposed removals on today's calendar. For anyone listening out there, San Francisco has a 13.7% tree canopy, which is the smallest of any major city in the United States compared to the rest of those cities that average 25%. And this percentage includes parks, for example, the Presidio and Golden Gate Park. Our 2021 Climate Action Plan called for 40,000 additional street trees by 2040 as part of our city's response to the declaration that we are in a climate emergency. Despite that, the city does not have any budget set aside for the planting and replacement of street trees. In 2016 and 2017, the city conducted a street tree census. In 2022, the city found that because we have no strategy to meet the climate action plan and no budget, even if we did have one, we've now net lost around 1,300 street trees since 2017. Additionally, we have hundreds, if not thousands, of trees behind on the city's deferred street tree planting list, again, with no viable replacement strategy or budget. I assume most people on the call don't realize it, but our city does have an urban forestry council, which is a group of people who are tasked with helping to protect our paltry street tree canopy. At a July 2022 Urban Forestry Council meeting, one of the members of the council stated, quote, "We should hold on to shabby trees because at least they are established and storing carbon." This council member suggested that San Francisco should not remove trees that are at least stable because there are no trees to replace them. That council member was Nick Crawford, who is the current acting supervisor for the San Francisco Bureau of Urban Forestry, the very bureau examining the tree removal applications today. I say all of this just to give some context about what we're going to talk about today, that we can't just look at these as individual trees, no big deal here or there if we take one down. That's how we've been doing it for a really long time, and that's why we are where we are today. So we just ask that we start looking at our urban forest as a whole and at its protection and management in the context of our climate resilience.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments?
Could you please identify all the speakers, like the previous person who spoke hasn't been identified? And since we can't see them, we would at least like to know who the speakers are.
Their names are listed as they move to the front, at least on my screen. I'm not sure how it looks on your end.
It does not show. That's why I'm asking.
Okay, that's a technical problem I'm unable to assist with. I apologize.
It's my understanding the speakers do not have to identify themselves if they do not wish to.
Okay. Do we have any additional comments for matters that are not on today's agenda? All right.
Yes, I have a comment, please.
Please go ahead. Please proceed with your comment. I'm not sure if it's a technical problem, but I'm not hearing anything from the speaker. Is anyone else hearing anything?
No, I'm not hearing anything.
Okay. Speaker, could you please double check your microphone?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Please proceed.
All right. It sounds as if you might be the gentleman who made the argument against all of the trees. I would like to say that you should possibly look at all of the trees before randomly handing out arguments against each and every tree removal, because some of the trees have grown into sewers. Some of the trees have raised the cement up 6 to 10 inches, and some of them are actually causing problems for the properties and for people walking on the streets. So next time, please go up and look at the trees before you randomly throw out arguments. This is not fair to homeowners who are trying to make their areas safe. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you for your comment. So several of these comments have fallen in line with items on the agenda. I would like to reiterate that right now this is for comments on items that are not on the agenda. Do we have any comments that are not on today's agenda?
I don't see any other hands at this time.
Okay, then we will go ahead and proceed with items on the agenda. We'd like to begin with order number 210282. May I have Public Works make its presentation?
Good morning. My name is Susan Alberry. I'm the I'm the staff representative for the Bureau of Urban Forestry this morning. And can you all see my first screen? Okay, the Public Works covered slide.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, looks good.
Okay. Okay, so I just want to go have a little introduction first. We are constantly balancing different objectives with our urban forest. We do want to ensure safe infrastructure and public right of way, but we also want to balance that with retaining and also adding green infrastructure. It is our mission to preserve and grow the urban forest while balancing safety and the needs of a growing and evolving city. So you can see that we are constantly in conflict with trees, as much as we try not to be. Ideally, we work with trees to try to live in harmony with them. And at times we find we're having to approve the removal of a tree when it's less sustainable to retain that tree. So we have we're close to completing our first street tree SF pruning cycle. And we are trying to balance the funds that we have with the priorities of the urban forest. So we passed the ballot measure in 2016, and it transferred responsibility for maintaining street trees and repairing tree-related sidewalk damage to property owners. We also completed a census and inventoried and assessed the condition of approximately 125,000 street trees. So this data has allowed us to prioritize the areas in the city where the need for tree maintenance is highest, allowing us to allocate resources to those areas that need the work more desperately due to deferred maintenance, and they're typically highlighted in red. So once we go through our first cycle, we anticipate being on a 3 to 5 year pruning cycle. That's based on the species and the need of individual trees. And you'll see here that sometimes we approve the removal of some trees under a permit if it's off cycle and the desire to the property owner to also replace a tree and plant a tree work in tandem with us not having to return to the grid off the cycle. So then we have the tree ordinance. It establishes and authorizes the Bureau of Urban Forestry to have jurisdiction over tree removal, tree retention, whether or not like somebody thinks they cannot work around it. We have arborists on staff to make that determination. And our urban forestry ordinance is codified under Article 16 of the Public Works Code. So we have within our ordinance, states that a removal permit is required to remove street trees, significant and landmark trees. If the department is removing a tree a replacement is required within 120 days. And it's tracked on a delayed replacement tree report. And we have actually not issued a delayed tree report, but we are tracking trees that cannot be replaced by an action called tree relocate. So whenever we have a tree that can't be planted in place, we put an action in that tree asset, and that action is called relocate a replacement. So we can likely run a report in that manner, but we think that we'll need to go back and look at all our removals to make sure that we're not missing anything. So if a property owner is granted a removal permit, we require replacement street tree or one removed that is equivalent, one replacement tree that is equivalent to the tree that's removed or impose an in lieu fee. We can also request that the owner pay the difference between the appraised value of the subject tree minus the value of the replacement tree. Our in lieu fee is based on the 24-inch box tree. So we have some removal criteria. It's not set in stone. We have a technical manual of sorts, and it's the director's order on planting and removal of street trees. And we approve the removal based on some criteria. I'm not going to say that these are all the criteria, nor will I say that these criteria will guarantee the removal of a street tree. But in some cases, we do approve the removal of a tree if, for example, a property that's building brand new housing on top of a tree within the footprint of a building, we might approve it. We don't have that case here. All of the trees here are street trees except for the one that was postponed. But we do have an in lieu fee and appraisal fee structure. So our first case, it's 210-282-255 Chattanooga. And sometimes I notice that the applicants have been waiting to make a comment. Please, we ask that after I give my presentation, that the applicant be ready to speak so that the public has all the information. So it's to consider removal of one street tree with replacement adjacent to 255 Chattanooga. And the removal will be by the applicant under permit 795042, and the staff approved the removal and the public protested. So this is a ficus tree, Ficus microcarpa. Its diameter is 21 inches at standard height. That's 3 meters from grade. And we approximate the tree height to be at 30 feet. That's generally where the cable lines are. Those are not high voltage electric lines. We don't prune for those. I just want to clarify that. It's okay for trees to be touching that. We did not approve the tree removal based on that criteria. What we did approve the removal for was the structure of this tree. And I highlighted here with that orange bracket, that exposed interior canopy. So what you get when you have a tree with a lot of healthy growth at the end and no interior growth inside the canopy and a bare limb is a cantilever effect. It's very simple physics. There's very little taper with that limb. And so we start to see limbs break off. The limbs that had been previously protected by limbs that had failed are now exposed. And when we have high winds, these limbs start to break off. This tree has pretty poor structure, which means it has included bark. It means it has a very tight union. And what happens with included bark is the growth of the bark starts to accumulate in between the union and push the limbs apart. This tree has had multiple failures, and we can replace the tree in the same location. So there is a photo of one of the unions, two of the unions. this tree has so much exposed interior limbs that it's kind of like an M&M with a candy coated shell. Like, if you try to reduce this ficus to reduce the frequency of limb failures, you'd be removing at least 50%, if not more than 70% of the canopy of this tree. And then there isn't very much fuel for this tree to regrow its limbs. It can't regrow those interior limbs. It's not, you can see here, there's no epicormic interior sprouting. What you see here is what you get. So if you prune the exterior foliage of this ficus, there's nothing that's going to regrow in the inside of that canopy to help save this tree. You're going to constantly have this issue where you're having to reduce the exterior foliage. And so that results in constant topping. That stresses the tree and it doesn't really increase like our canopy. You're removing foliage and you're having to constantly come back. I want to remind people that pruning trees is a very fossil fuel intensive activity. So if we're having to constantly come back and prune a tree to reduce its failure risk, we're often starting to outweigh the benefits of any sort of like carbon sequestration benefits. And if we're constantly shrinking the canopy of this tree to try to retain this bare wood, it's not going to be able to put on any diameter growth because we're removing its photosynthetic material, we're removing its food, we're removing its leaves. Trees photosynthesize, and the more leaves they have, the better it's going to be able to convert carbon dioxide and sunlight into carbohydrates. So if we keep topping this tree to try to reduce its canopy, to reduce its failure, we're just removing any sort of growth it would put on, and we'd be doing it frequently. And so, yeah, back to the structure here. If we reduce the limb, you might reduce the failure rate here of these two unions, but then there isn't really any interior foliage to help support the tree and support the woody biomass of that tree. And on the left, it had a limb failure. That's that exposed branching there. And then on the right, I'm just pointing out more poor structure. We don't love having to remove large canopy trees like this. Generally, the aesthetics of a large canopy tree is better than no tree. If I weren't looking closely, I'd be really happy to see a large, healthy, green, large statured tree. But unfortunately, like when we're asked to examine these trees closely, we have to assess the risk of failure and its future sustainability. So our inspector tried to appraise this tree because it was large, but he found with the number of failures, with the structure, and its functional limitations, which is its size for the sidewalk, which is in the 10th edition of our appraisal guide, it automatically reduces the value of trees based on their size in proportion to how much paved area. So it really just didn't appraise for more than what a 24-inch box replacement tree would appraise for. So we're just looking for the direct replacement, and the arborist found that the location was replantable, and because there's a street light in adjacent trees, he only recommended a small stature tree replacement. So I'm sorry to break that news to the public, but because it's in proximity to like larger trees and next to a street light, we don't plant large trees next to streetlights because then we're constantly having to prune it for the streetlight. So that concludes 255 Chattanooga for me.
Mr. Charlotta, you are muted. You need to unmute yourself, please.
Thank you for the reminder.
Sure.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Do we have a response from the member of the public who filed the complaint?
Hello, I'm not actually the member of the public that filed the complaint. I'm actually the applicant, the co-applicant. I'll just wait till it's my turn.
Yeah, we usually do have the applicant first, and also Mr. Charlotta, she had a presentation she'd like to share.
Okay,
So,
yeah, please proceed.
okay, so I will promote you to panelist. Please look at your screen when it comes on, and then once you come over as a panelist, you will need to unmute yourself once again. And can you unmute yourself as well?
Can people see that?
There we go. Yes, we can see. Okay, thank you. You will have 3 minutes.
Yeah, okay. So I live next to this aforementioned street tree, and I just wanted to just make sure to note that I am not someone who willy-nilly wants to remove trees. I actually planted 7 trees when I moved in next door, and I farm in the backyard, potatoes, garlic, dahlias, etc., and removed concrete hardscaping in our front to install a drought-tolerant front garden. The reason why I and my co-applicant requested to remove this tree is purely for the reasons that were aforementioned by DPW. We are worried about this tree. Here is actually this is a street plan, and you can kind of see all the orange that you see here is today, if you were to plant a tree, where you would be allowed to plant that tree, and the orange represents areas that you're not allowed to plant that tree. And the biggest factor here is the street light, which is 9 feet, 5 inches away from the location of this tree. And you can see the location of the tree in the top or the middle top area. And that is the location, there's a requirement by DPW to have trees 15 feet away from streetlights for medium trees, and this is a large tree. I just want to also note the reason why we bring this up and we requested this is we started looking into this ficus tree because I was trying to get some wire service by PG&E and they'd asked me to have it pruned back. And so we just stumbled upon this in the DPW website and noticed that it's the only tree that's mentioned on the entire DPW website, and it talks a lot about the issues. You're welcome to watch this video that Public Works put together, which is beautiful. And it talks about a lot of the things that the previous presenter talked about. I'm going to skip that because we already talked about it. And I think the main thing that worries me and my co-applicant is the competing limbs. This really scared us when we learned more about it. And given the incredibly heavy weight of these limbs, given how high the canopy is, and you see it everywhere on this tree, these competing limbs on weaker structures, weaker support structures, and there's this big risk of limb failure. The second thing, and I think this is, we also hired an arborist to look at this, and I think I'm just going to skip through it, but it also has a large underground root structure. In the concrete there, you can see it's cracked again, and it was actually resurfaced in 2019, 2020, sometime around there, because of the same type of root damage. So these trees tend to have this kind of large engulfing root structure. And finally, you can see this canopy. It engulfs the streetlight. You can't even see the streetlight. I didn't even know there was a streetlight until I saw a 311 complaint about the streetlight not being able to be seen. And my final thoughts, it's a really beautiful tree. I love green spaces in the city. We're not trying to remove green spaces. We're actually going to be replacing this tree. It's the main reason why we applied for this removal is I'm particularly quite worried about limb failure, the tree just falling over whenever we have these atmospheric rivers with high winds and lots of rain, which is now very commonplace.
30 seconds.
I worry about my kids walking by that tree during those atmospheric rivers on their way to Muni, on their way to school. I actually tell them to cross the street and walk around that tree because it freaks me out so much. Last year, there was this large ficus on Valencia that fell in front of the Ortega printer shop. This past winter, I saw a ficus limb failure on Cesar Chavez and Dolores Street. These are just failures that I have personally seen. I don't have a comprehensive catalog, but I do know that they tend to have failures. We plan to replace this tree with a frontier elm with consultation with the DPW staff. And our arborist believes this is a better suited tree for this location long-term, given its stature and the way that it grows. With that, I thank you for listening and considering.
Thank you for your presentation. Okay, sorry to jump the gun. Now, are there any members of the public who wish to speak on this agenda item? All right, I see a hand up. Please proceed.
Caller, I just asked you to unmute yourself. Can you unmute yourself and speak, please?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, we
Yeah.
can. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm actually the co-applicant, so I'm not a protester. I just wanted to reiterate all the things that have already been said. And we have 2 children. We just actually had a baby this past month. And we are just very concerned about the tree's safety. It is, we had an arborist also when we first bought the house in 2013 who told us that, while it was a, very dense foliage tree, it was very unsafe. And he recommended that we, prune it back significantly, which we did, and it grew back very vigorously, but not in the ways, he had told us that even though we did that, it was likely going to not make enough structural change to make the tree safe. And I think that's been borne out by the comments that we've heard from the Department of Public Works, and then from the arborist that my co-applicant and I hired to look into it. And so, again, we're going to replace this tree. We like greenery. We want to increase the canopy in the city. This is not we're not just trying to get rid of a tree because, we don't like it. It is unsafe. I don't want my 2 children. I have no, my co-applicant can have her kids kind of walk around it. The tree is directly in front of our home. That is the way that we have to egress. I every time there's high winds or rain, I'm always afraid, and I tell my son to run out in case the limb falls. So, but again, we want to replace the tree. We want more greenery in San Francisco. This is not one of those moments when we are just trying to get rid of a green space. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Do we have any other comments?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please proceed.
Yeah, I'm the arborist that was just spoken about as far as looking at the particular ficus. And I really have very little to say because everything I was going to say has already been said. I thought that Ms. Nawberry summed it up quite nicely, but also that my client Sue Yoon did a wonderful job of
Okay, thank you.
as we all love maturing tree just to fit into the kind of size and scale of the neighborhood. I think it makes a lot more sense, and all the other reasons that were already given, I think, make the whole argument quite complete. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have additional comments?
I just want to step in before our next commenter that we are having some technical difficulties. So thank you everyone for your patience. Sometimes someone will be speaking and then it's like their sound just disappears. So, so just please bear with us this morning, but thank you.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Please.
It's So just procedurally, it's my understanding that when applicant applies for a tree removal, it is then the applicant's responsibility to replace the tree if it is approved for removal, and that has to be done within 6 months, and that it also has to be done in compliance with city requirements, everything that the applicant presented around distances and that sort of thing, and also the approved tree list. I don't personally, I've planted trees with Friends of the Urban Forest for over 13 years. I've never planted a continental elm on public right of way. Maybe that's on the street tree list. I'm not sure, but I will just say that the elm sounds like another large statured tree, which I'm not sure how that aligns with the fact that we just said the current large statured tree isn't the right tree for that location. Anyhow, just kind of raises some flags that maybe there's a lack of alignment between the applicant and what the actual city requirements are. And I raise this because I sure hope we don't end up here in another 5 to 10 years because we put the wrong tree in that spot. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Do we have any additional speakers?
Good morning. First off, the ficus tree. Ficus trees in San Francisco is the third most planted tree in San Francisco, and now you want to remove it. Looking at the street, both sides of the street already currently have ficus trees on it, so therefore you are removing a species that are on both sides of the street that was never mentioned by anybody so far, and so therefore this is a current tree on both sides of the street that were planted by put in, and so this and then the issue of all I'm hearing is about current rules that the BUF has on ficus trees. Nothing really of importance to me as being stated, because in the Hayes Valley, Mission, all over the city, ficus trees have been asked to be removed, but first the neighborhoods back off, and BUF does not remove all the trees that they say they want to remove, and also they started several years back to do experimental pruning, which improved the life of those trees. And so therefore, that is a real response to this, is to do the pruning appropriately instead of taking out a tree and trying to explain away why it should be removed, which so far I haven't heard anything that I haven't heard. Limbs are going to fall. That's part of being in San Francisco. Those are facts of me even walking down the street under a tree that it could hit me. So that's no reason to remove a tree. And these, again, like I said, there are thousands of these trees around the city, and so this order is over 10 years old, and also the person that wrote it has been indicted. So therefore, I want to include anything that a person that has been got up in a scandal and was paid probably to write that order, that it should not be included anymore in these hearings as a reliable order for somebody that is now in jail. Thank you.
All right. Next speaker, please.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. And I can't believe that we're talking about the tree and somebody says it's no big deal if tree limb falls on somebody's head. I don't know who the speaker before me is, but that's just a ridiculous statement. People have been killed in this city because of tree limbs falling. I support the application and replacement of the tree.
Well, thank you for your comment. I will note that people have their own opinions, and we're here to hear everyone's opinion, whether or not we agree with them. Do we have any additional speakers?
I see no other hands at this time.
Okay. In that case, would Public Works like to make a response to any of the comments?
I can speak to the arborist who handled this application about the replacement species. And it sounds like the applicants are amenable to a variety of tree replacement suggestions. So yeah, we can review that and make sure it's not. I'm kind of wondering if the arborist recommended the city Sprite elm, which is supposed to grow under, supposed to be small enough for high voltage lines. So I'll talk to him. Yeah, we don't have the species aren't set in stone.
All right. I mean, from the information I received, it looked like that was a suggestion, but there had been no final determination on expressly one species and only one species.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I think it probably did come from the small list. All right. Yeah. Move on.
Okay. Then would either of the applicants like to respond to any of the speakers' comments?
Mr. Charlotta, we usually we don't have the applicants have any other comments. No
Okay.
one at this time.
All right.
But I
If you
have
do-
noted Sue's comment in the chat.
Okay. In that case, we will move on to the next item then. All right. For order number 210283, Public Works, please go ahead.
Okay. So this is 479 Prentice Street. It's in Vernal Heights. It's a removal of one street tree without replacement, and it's a Public Works initiated removal. This one's kind of painful because it is a really nice tree. And we try really hard to avoid removal of trees that, like, this is a perfect tree. It has pretty good structure. It has really good height to canopy ratio. It's just planted in a really, really, really narrow sidewalk. This is why we have to consider species and placement. It has some predominant stems, but I don't think it's as significant of an issue with this species in comparison to ficus. And again, it has a lot more of that interior growth. But the pruning it's not the issue here. So as you can see to the left of the tree, there is a driveway there, and it's right up against the driveway curb cut. We have identified a replacement within a few blocks, I believe. I'll double check with the inspector, but it does have a relocate replacement action in the database. So, and then as the inspector noted, if we're unable to plant within 120 days, and we have to indicate the reason for the delay. This is a situation and topic that our members of the public are very familiar with. Unfortunately, the root pruning that's occurring is on the tension side of the lane, and the tension side in broadleaf trees is the side opposite of the lean, and it's where trees put on most of their growth to counterbalance a lean. So if you cut roots there, it's kind of like cutting a cord on tension, and trees tend to fail when you do that. Again, a lean in and of itself is not a hazard as long as it is corrected, as with tension, growth, or the tree has like phototropically grown upward, which means toward the sun. So it's a very narrow sidewalk here. And the tree has become girdled by the sidewalk too, so it's also becoming an issue for the tree, not just the sidewalk. So if this were the only issue here, I personally would probably try to do a pinch point and shave down some of the concrete. But the arborist went back and forth with this site, and she's pretty upset about removing this tree, to be honest. However, if you see here where that like weird thing that looks like a grenade is the sewer. And it's also where the driveway needs to be placed to grade. So if it were just a situation where we're trying to just retain the tree and fix the sidewalk and make it safe, we may be able to keep it for a while. But we also have to replace all the concrete around the sewer line and the driveway. So she marked in green all the roots that would have to be cut to replace the concrete. And again, it's not just in that path of travel, which is the roots, the smallest ones in the foreground. It's the super large roots headed toward the right where that driveway is. And that's basically what's going to destabilize the tree. So that's why we approved the removal of this tree. We didn't love having to do it. It pains us, especially to have to approve large tree removals in Bernal Heights, especially because a lot of people in Bernal like trees, and then we tell them that they can't replace their trees. So that's 479 Princess.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Do we have the applicant or property owner?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please proceed.
Thank you. I'm the property owner. And believe me, it pains me on this tree as well because it was planted before I purchased my home over 20 years ago. So I hired a contractor to review this, and then they spoke with the arborist and DPW. And when the removal is like the photo you see here, so it won't pull up my photos because it shows it pretty well, but it's endangering the walk for people walking around has been an issue as well. But for my driveway, it's getting harder and harder to get my car in and out because it is uprooting the part of the concrete of the driveway, both at the curb and you can see in the foreground of this photo, the actual rest of the driveway leading into my house. We've also had sewage blockage problems on our street affecting several houses in the past. And when DPW came out, they found a tree root ball, not this particular tree, but one very nearby that was a major cause of a lot of the sewage backup. And trust me, between one of the previous speakers, who is my next door neighbor, and we suffered over $50,000 of damage to our houses because of the backup. So when a plumber came out and looked, and he said, look, at this rate, it's already something is down there. It is likely from this tree. We would have to investigate to confirm, but if this tree stays, it will get into your sewage line and it will cause a backup because of the gravity. The house is below, the sewage line is below the tree heading east. So I would be very welcome to a new tree being planted there, but it is an extremely narrow spot, and that's the problem. What you can almost see to the left of the photo is the water line. So, water going into the house as well. Also, what isn't shown is that it's growing up around the wires leading into my neighbor's house. So that has been an issue as well, but I know pruning can address that. It was been pruned by the city, I think 2 years ago. But our concern here is the fact that it's a very narrow location, so it would have to be a very small tree. And so I rely on DPW to assess that. So I personally would love if there was a way to keep the tree, but not with the damage that it's causing and will continue to cause for the driveway and the sidewalk and the sewer. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have any additional or any speakers from the general public?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please proceed.
I live at 479 Prentice Street with the applicant. So you could see it a little bit in one of the first photos, where you could see the sidewalk buckling several places around where the driveway was and right on the edges of the cement had risen up around 8 inches. Now, where the sidewalk was initially, it was only around probably 3 or 4, but it had risen up. And now, of course, all the cement is gone because we had already been in the process of trying to rebuild when the argument came up against the tree. But it was at a point where people were tripping constantly on the cement and it had become a hazard to most people walking. I myself had fallen on my face multiple times, injuring myself. Mind you, this is not something that we wanted. As Brendan had said, this was a tree that we were very proud of and we loved very much. And to hear that the area was not ideal for another tree was kind of a kick in the stomach, because we really did want to have another tree put in there if we were no longer able to have that tree there, because we had no time thought that we were going to have it removed. But the sidewalk is very narrow and it is not the safest area for some of the trees that are already here in several places. So as you can see from the roots, it's grown up severely above the street line. This is not only just a hazard for the sewer line, but it is also a hazard for people just passing by. And that is why we would like the consideration of this to be removed. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have any additional speakers?
No others. I think we're ready for the public now.
Okay. Do we have any public commentary?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
It's frustrating as someone who lives in San Francisco and looks at the myriad of issues our city is facing, how we don't seem to be able to solve for many problems at once. Our social, environmental, ecological issues are complicated, and that means that we need to have nuanced problem solving. And here, what we're talking about effectively, it sounds like, is taking out a perfectly good, big, healthy tree in a city that desperately needs big, healthy trees to level out a couple of concrete flags. I haven't heard discussion about possible more nuanced solutions. There's no requirement that a sidewalk has to be in a perfectly straight line 100% of the time. There's no requirement that every sidewalk is made of nothing but ecosystem destroying hard concrete. We haven't talked about alternative solutions whatsoever, whether that's the path of travel, whether that's a level but permeable surface. All we've talked about is taking out a tree to level off a sidewalk, and it sounds like perhaps a smoother entry into a garage. As far as the sewer system, that's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to address because we know that the city has an aging combined stormwater sewer system that is in many places in a large state of disrepair. And we know that trees don't destroy sewer systems. Trees absorb water. And so if sewer systems are in a state of disrepair, trees drink water. That's what they do, and that's also why we need to plant more of them to prevent some of the flooding and some of the extreme weather conditions that our city is facing. This is why we need these trees, is to be more resilient. The more we take these things out, we put in this concrete, is exactly the opposite direction that our city needs to be going, especially when we have not apparently engaged in complex and nuanced problem solving or solutions before we get to this point. That's all I want to say. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. Do we have additional speakers?
Yes, this is again another Brisbane box, which is again one of the top 20 trees planted in San Francisco, and it seems that there is really no requirement or necessary that the well for this tree cannot be expanded, so that for the tree can stay. All I'm hearing is that possibly a tree trip hazard, but then because the city is now liable for that, that is a city responsibility, not necessarily the property owner's responsibility, and also that this is started by Buff. Buff does not have any money to plant a tree, so basically, but they also are not saying that they cannot plant a tree at another adjacent site. And I'm sure there are other locations within that neighborhood adjacent to this property that could take a tree. So there are multiple questions and no solutions really being set here, except for the expenses by the property owner and the issues that are happening to the property by the tree. But the neighborhood is losing a mature tree that was planted before the property owner bought the tree, bought the house. So I find that these things happen when as things age, and so it's just a response of having a property for over 20 years, and these issues happen. So I think that the tree should be looked at a more resolved in a better manner and not be removed just because of the issues that were stated at this hearing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Do we have additional speakers?
Hi, my name is Michael Nulty, N-U-L-T-Y, and I just got onto the hearing, but I heard the previous speakers and I agree with everything they've said because of the fact that the trees are more needed into every neighborhood, and the city does not have funds to replace trees. So once you remove a tree, it's very hard for the city to find a way to replace them if they don't have the funds. I see here the condition of the tree is good. So, we're supposed to be preserving trees, and that should be the obligation of the city department to preserve trees. So, since it's good, that should be the priority of the city, is to preserve the tree. And if they need to replace it, or if they're trying to replace it, they should be replaced somewhere in the immediate vicinity, which is again another obligation of the city to make sure we have adequate canopy in San Francisco. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have additional speakers?
I don't see any other hands at this time.
Okay. Does Public Works wish to address any of the comments?
Not at this time.
Okay. In that case, we will consider this item closed and move on to the next. All right. For hearing order 210284, Public Works, please proceed.
So this is for 551 Alvarado Street, and it's to consider the removal of one street tree with replacement adjacent to 551 Alvarado, and the removal by the applicant for permit number 794772. And staff approved the removal and the public protested. So it's another large stature tree, a New Zealand Christmas tree. And again, it's another tree we probably would have retained were it not for a situation where there's a conduit being replaced that could cause a whole tree failure based on the extent of root pruning that's required to install the electrical conduit. So the location has to be replanted and it needs to be replaced by equal tree of equal value. It does have codominant stems, so the structure isn't perfect. It has a very large basin, albeit it's creating that 6-foot path of travel pinch point, which is for a wider sidewalk more of a minimum path of travel. But it looks like it's doing okay in this spot. You can see in the concrete surrounding that we've shaved all those other flags to try to retain the tree in the past. So they're replacing a gas line, they're replacing the sidewalk, and then they're also rebuilding a driveway. Rebuilding. All right. And so that's going to be in one quadrant of the critical root zone. So the combination of 3 different directions of root pruning. So this is that sort of cloud is the drip line of the tree. And then there's multiple things going on here. So the magenta area is a proposed driveway. And then the orange area, there's going to be a pipe replacement. That's actually closest to the trunk of the tree, and that's probably the biggest impact were it not for this driveway that was approved. Typically, we're trying to get in the habit of telling the planning department not to just approve a driveway if they see a street tree, because what they tend to do is they approve garages based on the building frontage, but the planning department has absolutely no purview over the right of way. So their approval of a garage or a driveway is contingent upon any right of way permits. So the approval of garage is by no means a guarantee of alteration in the right of way. So there's multiple things going on here. The root pruning that would occur for sidewalk repair, for installation of a new driveway, a gas line, which looks like it would be installed around 3/4 of the critical root zone. And the tree appraised for $11,600. The equivalent of that is 2 48-inch box street trees. There's not room for 2 48-inch box street trees. So the arborist recommended 1 48-inch box street tree with $5,500 appraisal combination. So that's why the arborist approved the removal here. The construction was essentially necessitating the removal of the tree, and he determined that 1 48-inch box tree And $5,500 would be the equivalent of this street tree.
All right, thank you for your presentation. Do we have the applicant or property owner?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Randy LaRoche, and I'm the owner of 551 Alvarado Street in Noe Valley. I'm a third-generation San Franciscan with a strong interest in improving and maintaining vintage homes. To date, I've restored 4 houses that had known many decades of neglect. I'm also an avid gardener with concern for green projects in our city. I've been a loyal supporter of SFFUF, Friends of the Urban Forest, since the 1980s. I've planted trees with this group. I helped organize a planting in my current neighborhood location, and I have helped neighbors to maintain theirs when they were unable to. My spouse and I continue to contribute annually to FUF, as well as other organizations such as the Parks Department, which we support. Our project provides for the meticulous restoration of a very much neglected late 19th century residence, prioritizing historic preservation alongside the addition of a new dwelling unit. Throughout the project's development, we have diligently conducted all mandated neighborhood outreach meetings and underwent a 30-day public notice period to the neighborhood without receiving objection. During the early phase, we engaged an arborist to evaluate a tree on the property. After extensive review, it was recommended to remove and replace the tree for several reasons. First of all, the roots of the existing tree had displaced a gas line. We believe the gas line should be replaced for safety. The removal and replacement of the gas line would require severe root pruning on the west side of the tree. Second, the roots of the tree had displaced the sidewalk vertically by 3 inches. The sidewalk has already been shaved down for safety, as you can see in the photo. Our project proposes to replace the sidewalk and reestablish the original walkway grade. This would also contribute to tree loss or damage, unfortunately. Lastly, our proposed driveway that was approved by the planning department will also require removal of buttress roots on the east side of the tree. The arborist determined that this work would result in a high risk of whole tree failure that cannot be mitigated by any maintenance means. Because of this determination, the arborist recommended that the tree be removed for safety purposes to protect life and property. Although we have requested that the tree be removed, we will plant a new street tree in its place and pay the fee for the difference between the assessed value of the current tree and the replacement tree. I'd like to note personally here that in 2 of the properties I have restored in the past, I planted evergreen pear and Victorian box, which did quite well.
30 seconds.
Okay. Approval for the project has been granted by both the planning department and conditionally by Department of Public Works after thorough review. We respectfully request that their approval stand. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have any additional speakers from either applicant or property owners before moving on to the public?
Make sure I just wanted to make sure I was able to talk.
I don't know who JSWLC2 is, but the public comment can't be taken over chat.
Is that you, Dave?
Ms. Woods, did you wish to make your comments now?
Yes, please.
Okay.
So I live next door to this tree, and as far as I can see, it's a lovely tree and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But I am not a tree expert. What I did notice that in the permit application, plan for the tree But what was shown was a tree in the backyard. So if your determination was made in any way based on that drawing is incorrect. So in the permit, it says the tree is going to be damaged by the driveway. But the driveway is going to be put smack bang in the middle of a 30-foot long section of road that provides 2 parking spots. And this driveway is going to take 2 spots off the street. On top of that, the new San Francisco rule means that we're going to lose another 3 to 4 spots off the street at the end, because it has to be 20 feet back from the end. So it's providing 1 parking spot, taking 2 parking spots from the street, which I am actually formally going to object to. And if that's one of the reasons why this tree has been moved, I think you should need to reconsider the whole thing. The other thing too is that they're going to have to need to bring new utility lines into this property. As it stands, they've got 2 bathrooms, which they're going to now replace with 6.5 bathrooms, 2 kitchens and 2 laundries. That means they're going to have to dig up the whole road and bring in new water lines and new gas and everything. So they can reroute these utility lines. They don't have to go in exactly the same spot as to where it was before the last, existing. They bought this property knowing that there was no curb cut. So, they're trying to put something in there knowing that they knew they were going to have to take down this tree when they were looking at the property. And I think that's basically it, really. The curb cut is the really big issue that I have. I don't think the location of the curbs, I think it needs to be reconsidered. It's got 1 parking spot, taking 2 parking spots from the street. And this tree that's going to be damaged by putting in that curb cut won't be damaged if there's no curb cut. And that's it.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Do we have additional speakers?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm gonna try to get through my notes on this one. It looks like we are part of the reason for potentially taking out this tree is to put in this new gas line. Or replace a gas line, and as someone who tries to keep up with all of the San Francisco climate initiatives, it's kind of confusing that the city is phasing out gas as an energy source for climate resilience, but here we are simultaneously updating gas infrastructure and killing a large, healthy tree while we do it, both of which would seem to be a double whammy against what's called for in the city's 2021 climate action plan. It doesn't sound like this is about updating a vintage home. It sounds like we're adding a driveway to a vintage home. So this is not redoing something that exists. It's affirmatively putting in more combustion engine infrastructure, for lack of a better term. The fact that this was approved by planning, really is not remarkable when it comes to tree removal, because planning doesn't consider existing trees on site. If you talk to most people in the planning department, it's as if trees don't even exist in the city. They're not asking permit applicants to see how those trees can be preserved. That conversation doesn't happen at planning. It's typically up to the Department of Public Works to try to get involved in those conversations and push back on that, but didn't unfortunately hear anything in the presentation that sounds like the department actually pushed back on this at all. After planting personally around 800 trees in the city, the main lesson I've learned is that not that we need to just keep maniacally planting trees, which we do, but more importantly, we need to preserve the large, healthy trees that we have. I did mention the climate action plan when I talked about, not adding more concrete to the city and phasing out gas. And the last thing that I just want to note is that our 2021 climate action plan, which again was created in response to our 2019 climate emergency declaration. So this is going on 5 years from that now. This called for policies of tree preservation in development and infrastructure. And it called for that by last year. And I have not heard anything the department, from the presentation, the applicant, about how our departments lived up to what is called for in our climate action plan, which is intended to keep this city
30 seconds.
from reaching a point of climate emergency. That's already gone.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have additional speakers?
Yes, this seems again another issue of departments not talking to each other. Again, Buff not being at the table before during the planning department decides to deal with this project, and also the property owner coming along and wanting to enlarge the property, because that's basically what I'm really hearing is that. You're putting in a driveway. You're affecting the neighborhood. The current site and sites of the trees that are on that street, the basins are already coherent to other basins on the street, so therefore conflicting with again the sewers, water, going into a bigger building that they want to do, because they want to add more bathrooms, they want to add more bedrooms probably, and also what else they want to do is put in a driveway there. Again, something that was again, you take it to a Victorian home. It was built in the 1950s, whatever. That was probably one of the first buildings on that block, and now you want to turn it into a modernized building. So that it only has, so you're taking away also parking spaces for your neighbors. You're taking away fresh air for the neighborhood. You're taking away. You're not giving. You're only giving to yourself for this new property owner that wants to rehab with his partner multiple buildings and make money off that, and then sell them. What he's doing. And by the way, I'm a 5th generation San Franciscan, so I don't approve to what you're doing to your properties by coming in and knowing the current rules and just coming along and wanting to remove things for your own pleasure and for your own pocketbook, and also hurting your neighbors, the environment, and the city as whole, and not taking care of the neighborhood, and just moving on to your next project that you want to rehab. And I'm responsible for thousands of trees being put in San Francisco and spent thousands of dollars in getting trees planted. So don't, anyway, that's my response.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Do we have any additional speakers?
There are no other hands at this. Oh, I'm sorry. There is one hand. Just a moment.
Yes, am I on?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
My name is Dave Miller. Just to offer a little bit of information about the property itself. The home was not built in 1950s. It's over 100 years old. The current condition of that property is nearly blighted. If there has not been any care or attention that's been put into this house in over 50 years. The previous owners was a single family that through their various disputes decided that they needed to split the home up themselves. And so that Randy, the current owners, took that on as opposed to wanting to keep the house as a single family home, which would have been in their financial best interest, adhered to the heart of San Francisco's laws and desires to create more housing for the city. So they have actually created 2 units where a single unit technically was before. The house is in such a dilapidated condition that no matter who the owner is, the house will need to be remodeled from top to bottom, from foundation through roof. Randy and David are some of the few individuals that actually have the ability the knowledge and the money to invest into trying to do such a thing. There is no great development financial outcome for them by taking on this property. They have done this with other properties and have actually done it at a loss and for the benefit of San Francisco. And it is simply because it is a love and a passion for them to restore Victorian properties. As far as whether or not the city of San Francisco truly wants to create more housing, it seems clear that that is on the agenda, and to do so without any parking whatsoever for this building, to have 2 units, 2 families live there, seems to be somewhat irresponsible. And to be able to simply to create a curb cut and to remove a tree that, while it's a beautiful tree, will be replaced by other trees is, perhaps sad to some existing families in the neighborhood, but having a blighted house that's going to be open to more marauders and an enticement for people to come into the neighborhood and do more damage and to be squatters.
30 seconds.
That is also irresponsible. So the better choice is to make this a better home and to add, families who are going to contribute to the neighborhood to that area, as opposed to simply keeping the tree.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have any additional speakers?
I see no other hands at this time.
Okay. Does Public Works wish to make any response to comments that were given?
Not at this time.
Okay. In that case, we will close this item. Now, do we have anyone who joined and missed the call or missed the non-agenda commentary period at the beginning who would like an opportunity to speak? I'm repeating, this is expressly for comments not related to the agenda items, and if you already had an opportunity, then you've already had your opportunity. This is just for people who joined later.
There are no hands.
Okay. If there are no more public comments, I am closing this hearing. This hearing is now closed.